We will start from the beginning. Beginning of our political knowledge or political starting, which was a constitution based on democracy, drafted in the leadership of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. He was a staunch believer in democracy. I saw a video of him recently which appeared like an afterthought of democracy in India. Afterthought of what became of democracy in India. Well, he has many examples. He had studied a lot of systems in different countries. He has studied the history of democracy. And he had a view which he opted in drafting a constitution for us. But in the video I saw, he seems to have doubts on the representative democracy we are having now. To think of democracy, let us think about a sort of self-government of the villages in our country. They were called panchayats. Now it didn't need to have a deep knowledge in law or international politics to run a panchayat. All we need are people of the same sort of interests or same interests in the resources in the village on which they subsist. There used to be panchayats long before in our country. A self-sustained village administration headed by a chief, or we call mukhya. It was here. Okay. The democracy also, modern democracy also started from that point. Not here, but in Europe. There were these councils of city-states, not the Roman city-states, but Greek city-states, but much later, after the medieval times, small villages and groups of people containing artisans, farmers, they had their councils. These councils decided their administration themselves. They had meetings regularly and people went there and stood for their interests, talked for their interests. This was the beginning of democracy. This is what gave Rousseau the idea of getting free from the bureaucracy and aristocracy. He knew it could be done if people united in this way on much further scale. So that is how it began. Okay, and when countries accepted the system, there were a lot of changes. Like in Britain, where there were different classes, different group of interests, like the labor or the capitalists or the aristocracy who had the lands and dominated agriculture. So these groups talked for themselves, made representation of leaders. They needed to advocate their causes. That is how it became a political setup in an international setup. Now we have some problem in that. Though we accepted the democratic method, we didn't have classes which are open, which really knew their interests. The interest we envisaged was copied from other countries. One of the main interests of the Indian people were caste interests, which were hidden after this democratic principles, hidden under these democratic principles. So this was a major setback for us. The system of society here was an hierarchical society based on caste, and these people had their interests, caste interests. What will be the modern situation or modern way of living we adopted? Underlying this was this caste interests. Okay. So we had a drawback there. So now after so many years of elections and self-government, we are at the same point, because even we cannot choose our interests. The people representing us are not represented individually. They are given a sign, a bullock, or a hand, or a boat. There are signs. The people are so backward that they cannot identify their own choice from a voting list. They have to identify a symbol of the party. So this thing is really very, very undesirable. What can we do? First, we have to be open-minded. We have to know our interests, and we have to stand for that interest openly. We don't have to wear a mask of democracy to be ourselves. The democracy should itself be us. Secondly, our party should be given very candid, easily acceptable objectives, or we should make parties of easily acceptable objectives, discernible from each other. From this beginning, we can start to find a real democratic polity in our land.